is the VR that needs some outdoor echo so in my Ghana. Say, and this time around, I have a very special news for you. Each Cameroonian with your Marcia,
or as an independent onto another party, or a party to an independent candidate in the next election, you cannot be seen to be vacating your seat in the current parliament you're serving.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, in order for that action to be invoked, in relation to Article 99, who has the power to do that? Who can go to the High Court and say that this gentleman has taken this action as a result of that, per Article 99, I want you as a High Court to do what is needful.
So that's how confusing the Supreme Court ruling is. The more I read the judgment, the more I became embarrassed. What I noticed is that the Supreme Court sought to rewrite the Constitution under the guise of interpretation. And they have no such jurisdiction. They have no jurisdiction to rewrite the Constitution as they purported to have done the last time that this matter was in court, or per the ruling. Why? The Supreme Court, in my view, acted unconstitutionally.
How can it?
It can. Because the Supreme Court itself is under the Constitution. And the Supreme Court cannot give an interpretation which is not born out of the Constitution. So when the Supreme Court gives an interpretation that is not born out of the Constitution, that is unconstitutional. And I've heard the Attorney General say that the law is what the Supreme Court says it is. You heard him say that. And I cringed. The law is what the Supreme Court says it is if it is born out or is envisaged by the Constitution. The Supreme Court is not higher than the Constitution. So today, there is no way, if the judges in the Supreme Court, all of them sleep and wake up and say that we want to make a ruling that all men in Ghana are women and women in Ghana are men. And they agree at their conclave and then interpret the Constitution, a portion of it or a provision of it, and say, so it is. That cannot happen. In other words, the Supreme Court cannot on its own decide that, even though the words are clear, who will say it is like this? I don't know whether you are following me. The Supreme Court has no such power. They have no such power. The Supreme Court, I've said time with our number, and people, you see, people, we have made it look, and the Attorney General has also helped in that. We have made it look like the Supreme Court can say what it wants. Never. The Supreme Court itself is a creation of this Constitution, and so it's under it. First and foremost, was there even an issue of interpretation? There wasn't. The words are very clear. But they went ahead to interpret and said that the fact that you pick a nomination form does not mean that you are joining a political party. And I asked myself, you are joining a political party different from the vehicle that brought you in. And I asked myself, can I, who is known to be an NDC, just walk into the NPP constituency office and pick a form and say I'm going to contest for NPP candidate? Can I just do that? Before you pick the form, you must have first joined them. I'm saying it again. Before you pick a form and even go for nomination, you must have first satisfied the conditions of being a member of the party before you can pick the form. So, let's take the speaker, the deputy speaker. Isiama was independent.
Now going
for party.
Party, yes.
What it simply means is that the NPP have satisfied themselves that he's now their member. That's how come he can pick a form. And what is the Supreme Court saying? That even when you file your nomination, it doesn't mean that you have crossed carpet. How is that possible? This is a program ordinary Ghanaians are listening. So me, I don't like quoting article this.
You like to go ordinary?
Ordinary.
Okay. So let me just refer you then. Because despite the existence of the provisions in the NPP's constitution, which makes it automatic and very clear that if you take certain actions, pursuant to, then you forfeit your membership, thereby meaning that ideally you shouldn't be representing the same party in parliament. When you come to the national constitution, in this judgment, the Supreme Court says in its own estimation that there is no doubt that rival meanings have been placed on the provisions of Article 97 1G and H of the 1992 Constitution by the Speaker's statement on the floor of Parliament, and the plaintiff thereby displacing all lingering doubts that this is a proper case for invoking the original interpretative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court as so established. That clearly means that in the mind of the Supreme Court, they feel this is in their domain.
I disagree with them because we all did interpretation at the law school, including them. You give words their ordinary meaning first. Give words their ordinary meaning first. The meaning on the street of Accra. Give those words that meaning first. And if it leads to absurdity, then you can now bring in a secondary meaning. Didn't we do all this in the law school? Give these words that you have read, give them their ordinary meanings, and let's see whether there will be absurdity.
Shadrach, put Article 97.
You put them, read it.
Put them on the screen so that everybody will see.
And we'll see whether it would lead to absurdity. You don't just jump into the middle and then start saying that you want to interpret. For what reason? Those words, and I said, and Justice Tanko has also reiterated that point, this judgment will not stand the test of time. And you know what they have done? They have effectively struck down Article 97. Article 97, the question is, when will it ever be relevant the way they have done it? When will we ever, when will we ever say that per Article 97, a minister, a member of parliament has crossed carpet? They have effectively done away with it. They've made it useless.
They've rather given it a meaning they deem fit.
And I'm saying that let's follow their meaning. When we follow their meaning, when will this article ever be invoked? It will never happen. It will never happen. See, I was here the last time and I asked the question, what did the speaker do for the writ to be filed against him? And it is true. The majority side admitted that the writ was filed on the 15th. Speaker's action was on the 17th. So the writ preceded the speaker's action. So what are you calling on the speaker? What are you calling on Parliament, on Supreme Court to do? There was nothing before the Supreme Court.
What was the reason for the writ on the 15th?
Because what Afenyo Markin is seeking to say is that the speaker's pronouncement must be declared null and void. On the 15th, the speaker make any pronouncement for God's sake.
So you're saying what? He was only acting on speculation on a campaign platform?
Supreme Court doesn't take speculations.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying that there was no course of action. A course of action has not arisen. See how they try to meander their way out of it. There was no course of action. Now, one would have expected that now that the speaker had made a pronouncement on the 17th, per the Supreme Court rules, you can amend your writ. One would have expected them to amend their writ to reflect the complaint they have. They didn't amend their writ. So what was the Supreme Court going to determine when speaker had not yet, as it were, spoken? That's another flaw. another flaw. You see? So there are a lot of flaws in this judgment, and it is not helpful to our democracy. And I tend to agree with my senior Chachikata that coup d'etats are not only carried out by men in uniform, but they can also be carried out by men and women in wigs and gowns.
Alice Cool.
You know? So, you look at all these things, then you begin to think that the building blocks of our democracy are being chipped away gradually, and at the end of the day, we will not have a democracy. This is not how I expected the Supreme Court to conduct itself. And I agree with Justice Tanko that a future Supreme Court, differently composed, would overturn this.
I see. Very interesting. Lawyer Makobodo, at the end of the day, practical lessons that we can all learn from this, and then making those deductions from this judgment also means that we've come to a position where a member of parliament could take an action to stand on the ticket of another party or as an independent candidate whilst in the present parliament, and will be made to represent his party irrespective of whether he's competing against them or not, or whether his party's own constitution goes against his actions he's taking. Is that right?